The Trump administration is once again positioning itself as a mediator in the war between Russia and Ukraine. A trilateral summit has been floated, security guarantees debated, and talks with Putin and Zelenskyy remains uncertain. What's really happening behind the scenes? Well, joining us today on TVP World is Michael MacKay, former lecturer at the University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy and a seasoned analyst of international conflict dynamics. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So President Trump has given a 2-week deadline for progress or face massive sanctions or tariffs if no meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy has materialized. How credible do you find this ultimatum?
Not at all. Trump has given numerous deadlines such as this. This is the third one in which he's actually said 2 weeks that I can recall. Others have been vague, and there was a 50-day one. So it is not credible at all. And don't forget that he gave this deadline not directly in response to this idea that the two leaders would sit down, but when he was asked a question about the Russians bombing an American factory. So that it's clearly a diversion, and this threat, if it is that, it is not credible at all.
Meanwhile, Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov says that no summit will be held until a clear agenda is agreed upon. Of course, a lot of people are looking at it as a delaying tactic, but at the same time, it does really seem like two sides can really reach a conclusion.
No, it's Russia that cannot reach a conclusion because it cannot possibly set any terms for a meeting, and therefore it sets impossible terms. So, for example, this preconditions for a meeting are in fact that Ukraine agree to give up Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, that they agree never to join NATO, that they demilitarize, that they never bring up the issue of reparations. That's actually Russia's precondition for having a meeting where these things would actually be decided. So it's not a question of both sides. That's a false narrative completely. Don't forget, Ukraine has agreed to an unconditional ceasefire, which is the first condition for talks. Russia has refused an unconditional ceasefire, has escalated its attacks on defenders and civilians, and then sets impossible conditions every time the possibility of a meeting between Putin and Zelenskyy comes up. In fact, Putin is afraid of such a meeting and will do anything to avoid it.
Right, so several questions to unpack here. First of all, about bringing up these impossible terms to kind of indefinitely postpone the meeting. You mentioned that Putin seems to be afraid of having such meeting. Can you help us unpack why that would be?
He's afraid because his base of power in Russia is fragile. If he were to meet with Zelenskyy, it would be as an equal. And he has never seen that. Remember, he sees Ukraine as a colonial dependency of Russia. He said many times that Zelensky's presidency is illegitimate. So he's boxed himself in a corner that he could not possibly meet Zelenskyy as an equal. In fact, it would be contrasted with his meeting with Trump, where he got himself to be declared as an equal, and that was a triumph. So there's numerous reasons why he could never meet with Zelenskyy.
All right, so we're essentially in a Gordian knot here. Like I mentioned, Russia setting impossible terms to not even meet, with the Trump administration pushing very hard for this meeting to actually take place, as well as European leaders still scrambling for a security guarantee for Ukraine. My question would be, what's next? If this deadline is met and, well, nothing materializes, how do you think America will respond?
Well, how I think America will respond is give another meaningless deadline and procrastinate and do anything to avoid imposing serious sanctions on Russia or providing serious support to Ukrainian defenders. So that's what I think is likely to happen. What should happen is that when the United States fails in its responsibilities, in 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks, as they will, that Europe step up and realize that the way to cut this Gordian knot is to take charge of European security in Europe. And that means committing to Ukraine's victory, committing to the defeat of the Russian invaders, sheltering the sky, imposing serious sanctions to the level of a total embargo. The steps are very clear about how we do cut this Gordian knot and get on the path to peace, which is only through Ukraine's victory.
All right, so like I said, Europe has to step up in order for this to be over. However, we are seeing also a lot of different narratives coming from different leaders. Foreign Minister from Germany have just recently said in the podcast that while they're having a stationed troop in Latvia makes it so that they cannot bring any troops to Ukraine, or a NATO general saying that foreign troops on the ground is also not being considered, or it's too early to consider that. Do you think that the disunity between all these different narratives is going to be a hindrance to actually reaching anything substantive?
Yes, it will. It will be a hindrance. This lack of unity. The European Union, for example, has not overcome the unanimity rule, so they cannot get past the stalling tactics of Hungary and to some extent Slovakia. And they can't shift out of this pre-2014 narrative. For example, saying, oh, will there be peacekeepers or not peacekeepers, makes no sense when there is no peace to keep when the war has not been won. So if a European country comes to its senses, and there are some in Eastern Europe in particular, and say the narrative should be about defeating the invasion. And we can't talk about restoring Ukraine and peacekeeping troops until the invaders have been defeated. And therefore, instead of peacekeeping forces, people should be talking about expeditionary forces. But the problem is this built-in institutional cowardice that democratic politics has evolved over the past, well, really 70 years since the end of the Second World War, has been a tremendous impediment to European unity and a tremendous benefit to the Russian invaders.
And speaking of the Second World War, today actually marks the anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact, which is a deal struck over the heads of smaller nations with devastating consequences for Eastern Europe. As we now see renewed talks between U.S., Russia, European leaders, do you think we are at the risk of repeating a history in a different form without the input of Ukraine?
Absolutely. We are forgetting the lessons of history, and we are repeating the mistakes of the past. I wrote today about how, in acknowledgement of this anniversary of the Molotov-Ribbentrop pact, that there is a pact between Russia and North Korea. North Korean troops are in combat alongside Russian troops invading Europe. And yet no European leader is confronting that. Instead, going back and talking about the risk of Europe providing serious support, including military support, to Ukrainian defenders. So that we have this absurd situation of an axis at war against Europe and an alliance which is afraid to defend, and the only defender is Ukraine, which is outside the NATO alliance and outside the European Union.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. Now, the 2-week deadline is counting down, and we'll have to see how it develops. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of World News Tonight. Before more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.